Conversations with Bob and Sherry is where the extrovert artist meets the introvert engineer. It's where analysis intersects experience. Join us as we explore news and culture to better understand what's true and important. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, Bob.
What'd you think of the debate last night?
Well, I thought that Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley and DeSantis did a good job. DeSantis was pretty much got left alone, which really helped him out. Everybody was attacking. I think Ramaswamy got most of the attack, and that kind of left DeSantis to be able to be more statesman-like.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought those three were strong. I think that after this debate, I hope to God I would never see Chris Christie again. I don't want to see Mike Pence again. I think it was painful and embarrassing to even watch the two of them when they start talking. I used to have some kind of respect for Mike Pence, but after last night, I'm like, eh.
Yeah, I mean, they brought the whole room down. And, part of this is what we're seeing with Biden. I mean, vice presidents are chosen for their lack of charisma. You don't want a vice president to overshadow the main, the presidential candidate. And that's what happened with McCain. I mean, McCain had other problems, but, he had a very charismatic, what was her name again?
Sarah Palin.
Yes, Sarah Palin. So Sarah Palin's personality and energy and everything just completely overshadowed John McCain. And, she complains that they kind of ignored her, and I think that's why. So if you look at Pence, he's sort of the poster child for that, I mean, he appealed to the Christian voter, which Trump had some issues with. He represented experience and long-term, but he was kind of boring and low charisma guy, and he's still that. So, I don't know. I agree. I thought he brought the whole room down, and Chris Christie with all of his negativity. And, I guess, the problem I have, I would agree with you. I'm a fan of Ramaswamy, and I thought DeSantis did okay. I think DeSantis needs to refine his positions better, but I thought he did a good job. I really liked when he objected to the raising of the hands. I thought that was a good objection. But Nikki Haley, to me, is not like them. I felt like Nikki Haley really is just the old establishment go-along. And the thing that concerned me a lot was when her and Chris Christie were beating the war drums, man, when they were dumping out all that fear of, look at all the horrible, ugly things, Putin, because that's what got us into Iraq. That was, and at the time I bought into it, but, Saddam Hussein's an evil, horrible guy. Look at all the terrible things he does to all these people. And then I find out later that was all a political, ideological think tank thing orchestrated as far back as 1998. So that was a foregone conclusion. I mean, we were lied to, and, I didn't believe that at the time, but, and that's where Trump created a lot of problems for himself, was when he attacked the Iraq war, at least with the never-Trumpers.
Well,
so anyway, I'm just real skeptical of this. We got to be there, and I'd rather hear a more balanced, I understand the risk here, the risk there, and Ramaswamy said it. You're pushing China and Russia together.
Absolutely.
So,
the best foreign policy was what Trump put together, because there was no war during Trump's time. He kept everybody at bay. He kept every possible alliance at bay for each other. His move to go see Kim Jong-un for North Korea was genius. I don't think a lot of people realize how genius that is, right? Because North Korea ultimately, in order for North Korea to stand out, they would rather align with United States. I know it sounds crazy, because they're under the thumb of China. If they can start aligning with United States, they can get out under from China, which they're a small country. So that was a genius move to show the world, look at North Korea, where the Western world is welcome you with open arms. because ultimately, when you become the leader of a country, Kim Jong Un is young. He and admire Western culture, and yeah, if we would have continued Trump's foreign policy as he did, we wouldn't have the Russian war right now with Ukraine. We would not have problem with China right now, and I don't think I was very frustrated at the time that the media is pushing this such a negative thing about Trump meeting the president for North Korea. That was such a
Right.
chess move. It's amazing. And
Well,
I have to
it,
say something about Mike Pence. You were talking about vice president and the charisma thing. I don't think anybody could have overshadowed Donald Trump. I don't care who you pick.
that's a good point.
So, but go ahead.
Oh, and yeah, I was just going to say, and the same thing with Putin. I mean,
Yeah.
Christie kept harping on Trump saying he's a strong leader, he's a smart guy, and all that was softening the guy up. I mean, he would say things like that publicly, but then privately, he was tough on these people. I mean, we know
Was that
that.
on China? He was in public.
Yep.
He's giving the Chinese leader all the face, right? And for these people, saving face is the most important thing.
Yep.
Is beyond money, beyond power. So if you
Yep.
have the United States president on the world stage to say, "Hey, I love you. You are fantastic. Let's be friends," and
Yep.
blah blah blah, and then Trump was tough on China in so many ways, but because he publicly praised Xi Jinping so much, Xi Jinping just go like, "Okay, I guess we have to pay the $16 billion tariff."
Well, I mean, yeah, the last thing you want to do, you tell me that Putin is an evil dictator, so he's egotistical, he kills people, this is his personality,
Yeah.
then isn't a better way to handle that to massage his ego publicly and then privately hold his feet to the fire?
Yeah.
I mean, so you don't have this. The whole thing that makes me nervous is the fear mongering. So what I heard from Chris Christie and from Nikki Haley, not as much as Christie, but definitely from Nikki, it was fear. Just fear and hate towards Putin, Putin, Putin. And the things that those troops are doing are not necessarily Putin there doing them. You send your troops in there, yeah, he's letting it happen. But it's so much easier to say, here's the devil, Putin, put devil's horns on him. Let's get everybody, afraid and angry and hate him. And then we as a government can do whatever we want. I mean, that's what they did with COVID. That's what they try to do with climate science. I mean, this is not science. This is not leadership and decision making. This is just getting dumbing down, using people's emotions so that you can do whatever you want. And that's what they're doing. The alarmism and fear, I'm very skeptical of it. I want to hear nuance. I want to hear rational discussion about the risks and the benefits and why we're doing what we're doing. And I do agree with the Republicans when they say that Europe has to step up and pay their share too. Why is it always us paying a disproportionate amount of the cost?
Well, this is where I like what Trump said on multiple interviews when they say about what do you think about the war. What he said, and I'm paraphrasing it. He said, "I don't want to see people die, no matter
Right.
people in Ukraine, no matter people in Russia. I just don't want to see anybody lose their lives." I mean, that is such a human thing to say, right?
Right.
He's not demonizing anybody. He said, "How would you like it? You're living in an apartment, and all of a sudden a rocket comes in, and the whole family get killed." That is a human thing to say. The Russian soldiers doesn't want to fight. The Ukrainian people doesn't want to fight. Who wouldn't want a peaceful life? So I really like what Trump said about that Ukrainian war on that in such a human level versus this. It's almost like this cartoonish
Wow. Yeah.
kind of like there's a devil here, we're gonna fight it. And it reminds me when I was a kid, China used to have these movies, right? It's propaganda movies. And when you're a child, you look at it, you're like, oh my God, the Americans are evil and Japanese are evil. I mean, it's amazing, when they get killed, you're like, great, the Japanese got killed, we won. And then as you get older, you realize, wait a second, that is a human being on the other side too. So if you
Hmm.
killed a Japanese soldier, a United States soldier, they also have
Right.
family that will grieve for that person. So yeah, I don't like the warmongering but unfortunately, there's a lot of big business in this country. It's profiting from war and from pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
So you're right.
And it
Any
helps incumbent politicians too. We're
right?
out here fighting the evil enemy, vote for
Yeah,
me. It helps.
it helps.
So,
So anybody who pushes war, and yesterday when Nikki Haley said you're wrong with the foreign policy to Ramaswamy, he's a businessman, right? He's young.
right.
He wants to see a good future for his family. He's not in the trenches in the political world. This is how a lot of politicians makes their money, profiting from these big donors and profiting from
Yep.
the war machine. So one of the things I want to say that I found very refreshing with Ramaswamy is his love and passion for United States and his founding as a son of immigrant.
Yep.
I love that because you don't see that much anymore. Like he carries that almost childlike passion to this country, which a lot of immigrants can identify, right? Because we come in. My father just had his 80th birthday, and
Hmm.
I have all my aunts and uncles there. And what they're saying to me is that, gee, my generation, we come to this country, we have to work hard, we have a language barrier, but now look at our next generation, which is me and my cousin's generation. We're doing better than they did. And then now we're looking at my sons and their grandchildren, my father's grandkids. Now my son can be like Ramaswamy. I'm not saying my son has any political ambition at this point, but it's a message of hope that I think Ramaswamy is giving to the young people, rather than this gloom and doom, hate your country, that kind of thing. So I
It,
really appreciate that.
it's literally the recipe to solve what everybody sees as a problem, and that's the divisiveness and the division and distrust within the country. If anybody wants to watch, spend a minute 6 seconds, and watch his closing speech. He starts with talking about him growing up, born in 1985. He's a millennial. It said they were talking so much about diversity and things like that. He goes, we forgot that we're all the same as Americans. He said, and we shared a common set of ideas from the time of the founding. And then he listed 10 things. Now, these are 10 foundational beliefs. They're his campaign, is what it is. But
This Ten Commandment, right? He lives in God is real.
not the Ten Commandments. He says things now, and you may not agree 100% with his 10 things, but his point was there was a time in America where everybody agreed on some fundamental, basic principles: right, wrong, good, bad, that kind of thing, and that is exactly what happened. And now we're being divided because people are bringing in other ideas, and I believe. So the problem is the identity politics. It's fueled by there's good people and there's bad people. Good people, bad people. Well, on the right, we have the conspiracy people. It's the same thing. They think we're going to solve everything by exposing the conspiracy. If we elect Trump, I got into a discussion with a friend, and I came to the realization, and I didn't know this, but he believes if the frontline doctors, the election of Trump, if all we do is expose the evil conspirators, they'll be taken down, and then everything will be fine. And that's not realistic. I mean, the problem is not good people versus bad people. It's we don't share the same set of values and beliefs. So we need to be talking about our ideas and beliefs, and that's exactly what Ramaswamy was talking about.
Well,
You know,
I,
it's
I
it's
think
common ground for all of us.
I think one of the reason the government definitely have a big interest and the media has a big interest in dividing people in this country because number one, our government has grown bigger and bigger and bigger. So there's a lot of bureaucracy going on. A lot of people relying on government to make a living. So the bigger the government grows, the more lazy people can work for the government, and they
Right.
don't have to perform very well. They can just be mediocre and less, and they still can make a living. And these are normally other people that connected with the politician, and a lot of our politician has made millions and millions of dollars from being a politician, like Nancy Pelosi. She just bought a $20 million house in Florida, and she's a California politician. It's like, well, so her herself is buying her retirement home in a red state. What does that tell you? And if you look
Yeah, a
at
lot of
the
people are.
age, yeah, if you look at the age of all these senators, it is sad that we have an 80-year-old senile president. We have Dianne Feinstein can't even talk. Mitch McConnell can't even talk. What happens is in this country is that you have all these old politicians has been in power for decades. And nobody wants to vote on term limit because they're profiting from not having a term limit. So to see such a diverse group of people yesterday on stage and being able to exchange ideas, I think it was great Trump wasn't there because if Trump
Hmm.
was there, we wouldn't hear all these people's ideas. I hope he's not going to be there again next time so we can see what these people are about. Chris Christie's sole purpose, I believe, is to come on the debate stage and bait Trump to lose it. And he didn't get that. And in turn, he kind of exposed himself for being an idiot.
How many primaries has he been in? I mean, he's like a professional loser of primaries. Why does he keep coming back and he doesn't never performs?
First of all, who's going to vote for him? He's so,
No.
I mean, nothing against, I'm not body shaming him, but as the president on the world stage, I don't think we want somebody that obese to be the president. My God. I mean, he's going to have heart problems. Well, I should not say that. We have a senile
Pretty
president right now.
pretty
So,
shallow.
yeah, the image is
I,
terrible. But, um,
I think that's oversimplistic, but yeah, I mean, there's a vibe to physical appearance, but
you
I
appear to be
here's what I
wrong.
think the problem is. So several of the candidates, Ramaswamy included, were asked if there should be an age limit. And Ramaswamy said, no, the voters can decide. Let the voters choose. The problem with that is, in order for the voters to choose wisely, you need to have an unbiased press. That was part of the First Amendment. Look at what happened with John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. I mean, the Democrats held out
Right.
from the debate, okay, until after several 100,000 mail-in ballots were cast.
Yeah.
Then they did a debate. The whole state, the whole country got to see his physical state was not at all what was being reported. But then even after it came out, the media defended him. They talked about it like it's discrimination and you can't do this. He's disabled. We got to treat it. It was just it's like a crime against the American people that this wasn't accurately reported. The Democrat Party should have been held accountable for what they did to the voters. They deceived the voters. And he won by less than the number of votes cast for him before the debate. I mean, that tells you right there he probably would not have won if the debate had been done or if the truth had been reported. So
So
that's the problem. I agree the voters should be able to decide, but what do you do when the press won't hold both parties equally accountable?
Well, here's what I have a problem with. So, in the Constitution, and it says in order to become the United States president, you have to be 35 years of age, you have to be a natural born United States citizen, right? Well, if there's no top limit, why don't we just have no age limit at all? And then I think that to say, I'm just saying this as if I was, well, why do you have to be a natural born American citizen? That's discrimination, right? So why do you have to be 35? You don't think people 18 is qualified enough? I mean, it's absurd that if we have an age limit for how young you when you can enter the race, we should have a top limit, because when you're 70, 80 years old, you a capacity of working or thinking or whatever is not you. Yes, you have life experience, but you're not going to have the physical strength to continue going. Now, here's the thing. I think Trump is exceptional. I mean, the guy is just like, he's like, I don't know how he does
You're
it.
contradicting yourself with my argument. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how he does it, because I don't think a younger person can do. I mean, Ramaswamy is definitely matching the energy level with Trump, but I just don't. I think there's got to be an age limit on the top end too, because then you will be avoiding. I mean, are we going to have two 80-year-old now again running for president? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Well, I think that the discussion over naturalization is a different discussion. But I think if you talk, and the issues behind an upper age limit or low age limit are very, very different. So, I mean, if you look back on your childhood, like I got into a discussion with my daughter on vacation. She was saying, she basically made the argument that an old person cannot represent the interests of a young person. And I thought that was silly, because I said, can a young person represent the interests of an old person?
I
And
think
she
that,
thought they could.
no, I think
My
it's the
point
other way
being,
around.
an old person has been young.
Young before.
Sure, times have changed and everything, but when my daughter gets to be 50, she's going to realize the error in what she's saying. But an old person has been young. So yes, you can't say an old person can't represent a young person, but I can say a young person can't exactly represent an old person. They've never experienced that.
Well,
So
so
there's definitely a valid reason to have a minimum age. But as far as a maximum age, I don't agree with. I think there should be fitness requirements after a certain
absolutely.
age. But you're basically lumping Trump and Biden and somebody with Alzheimer's all into the same bucket based on age. Trump and Biden, mentally, there's no comparison. So
No.
it would actually be discriminatory against Trump to say, because of your age, you're not mentally capable of serving.
That's
But
what the
Biden, it's just
Democrats.
true.
That's what Democrats said about Trump when they elected Trump. Didn't
Well,
they?
they don't like him. They don't like his
I know,
personality, so they say that
exactly.
he's crazy and he's
Yeah.
dangerous and things like that's what they use. But the whole reason they say those things and feel those things is they just don't like him.
Well,
But
and
there's
what's
no
crazy-
mental acuity issue. There's no doubt that Biden has, problems. I mean,
What
look
I'm
at how
saying-
he handled Maui.
Well, what I'm saying is, if you think about it, Democrat is saying that about Trump, but not saying that about Biden. So
Oh, sure.
they're hypocrites. And
Well, and Biden doesn't have press conferences anymore.
oh yeah, he can.
And when he does speak off the cuff, he always screws it up. But for the Maui thing, he said no comment. And then when he went down there, he told his little story about, oh, I know what it's like. We once had a fire and almost lost my Corvette and my dog. I mean, they said it was like some minor little thing in his basement or whatever.
Yeah,
It was put out.
It was
was-
20 minutes, and they put
It
out.
was put out in 20 minutes. He has no, and he's, apparently he said something about walking on the hot sand. He knew what it was like. He has no idea what those people went through.
Well, here's what I want to tell you about that comment he made in Maui. It was shown on all the conservative radios and the conservative streaming services.
There you go.
Watch NBC and CNN. Nobody would see that.
No.
So half of the country saw that comment. The other half did not see
Well,
that comment.
that's what I say. The bias in the media is a huge problem. So, I think the correct answer is the voters should decide. But the problem we have, and I don't know how to solve it until it's actually going to take the people to tell the media. Here's my challenge. Here's my way of solving it. Stop watching TV news. I've stopped completely. I don't watch any cable news now at all, and I don't let social media articles, people posting. I don't follow those either. I read the newspaper, and it's a world of difference. Because somebody else is not deciding what news I dig into and read, and
Right.
every story I look at, I get a much more unbiased, nuanced. Now it takes more time. You can't just read headlines. You have to read through it. And I got to tell you, I subscribe now to Wall Street Journal, New York Times, New York Sun, which is okay. I did it because I did all these because they were cheap. And then the Epoch Times. Epoch Times has a lot of content that
Yeah, I like Epoch Times.
I'm not in. I need to engage more of the video content. They got some really interesting and good quality video. But TV news is entertainment.
Right.
I don't care if it's actual news or if it's a commentary. It's entertainment. Sit down and watch cable news. Let it run for 2 hours, and you're going to see about 3 or 4 stories recycled over and over and over. There is so much more going on out there, and to the point I discovered what Biden is doing for the microchip problem between China and the U.S. and Taiwan. I was amazed when I saw what was happening.
Wait,
and as far as
that,
I know, no one's
you told
reporting
me
it.
that, but was Biden doing it or his other people doing it? I don't think Biden is the reason
Well,
it happened.
It was the Biden White House. I don't know who
Right.
started it, but they passed what they call it? Last summer, they passed the Chips and Science Act. So the Chips and Science Act said that we're going to take for the complex microchips, we're going to do manufacturing and development here in the United States for
Okay.
national security reasons. This is something you and I talked about on here a lot.
Right.
They've invested $39 billion of taxpayer money. They've hired a group of 36 private industry professionals ranging from age 23 to 64. Nearly half of them are women, so they got the whole diversity thing. But these are completely separate, independent technology experts and investment bankers. And the $39 billion is basically seed money. So they act like venture capitalists or private equity fund would. They put out, these are sort of bids they put out to companies. They've got 460 responses. So now they have to evaluate all 460 of these companies and decide who they're going to give the money to. Now, the actual cost over the next, I think it's like 10 years to develop all this chip manufacturing is $3 trillion. This is just seed money. The government is doing this this is like a startup. So they want to fund some of the fundamental research and things for companies to get to a point where they can attract private investment. But it all has to be manufactured here in the U.S.
We'll
And
see, because sounds to me is a lot of this money is going back to pay some of the favors. Now that you read it,
well,
we'll see what happens because
okay, one of the statements by these independent, private industry experts, the big challenge. Okay, this is Gary Clyde Hubbauer. He's a non-resident senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. So he's on the team. He said, politics always takes over. The big challenge for the team is expected pressure from the White House and Congress to steer funds to favored constituencies. As the 2024 election season heats up, he predicts the program will become less on chips and more on creating happy stories for job creation.
we'll
So
see.
he acknowledges, and he's public about the fact that they're worried about political influence on here because there are no bureaucrats on this team whatsoever.
We'll see. We gotta, the only way you're going to see whether this is going to be successful and actually meant to do what it is to follow the money and then see where it's all going.
How many people know what I just read?
Well, not too many people.
Not too many people. So that's why I'm saying stop watching the news. The news on TV is entertainment. I mean, this is actual information.
I don't
And,
think you're going to
you know,
stop people from watching the news. I mean, the fact that you might have all the time to read into this, but people like you are going to be very, very rare.
then know what you're watching is entertainment. It's not giving you the full picture. It could be 100% factual, but it's selective. They're choosing what they want you to know
I have
and
a
not
friend
know.
vote based on, you know,
What's
Milano.
what's the goal? What's the goal of Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC? What is their goal? When their executives get into a room and they talk about their business, what is their ultimate goal?
To get ratings.
It's the same as your business. It's to make
Right.
more money.
Exactly.
Okay, sure. Somewhere in there is a mission to provide journalistic, but from my viewing of it, the goal to make money as an entertainment business has far surpassed any journalistic aspirations they might have.
I
So,
think I think for everyday people, Bob, for everyday people that are living their lives, the only way they're going to start paying more attention is when things are directly impacting their lives.
when will they know? And when they know, how do they know how to interpret what's impacting their lives? I mean,
I
you've
think-
got Biden out there telling everybody Bidenomics is a great success because it slowed inflation and job, unemployment is there. So,
I
you
think
know,
people are start feeling it more and more, and I feel being that my husband and I have a restaurant. You talk to people people that just work every day that does not read Wall Street Journal like you do, and
well then
feeling-
listen to me. Tell me what you want to know about, because
Yeah.
I mean I'll give you the truth. So. The point being, this is all good. This is a good thing. The other part of the act was to say that we're not allowed to send these chips to China. This is for military reasons. So
we'll see. I'm skeptical. I will
the
see.
most recent event is that company investors were investing U.S. money into China, so for China to develop their own. The federal government just Biden signed an executive order to stop that. So you are no longer allowed to, Americans are no longer allowed to invest in microchip research for certain high, complexity, high tech microchips in China.
Don't
So,
get around it.
you can say it won't happen, it won't work, but you can't deny that it's the right thing to do.
It is the
I mean,
right
it's
thing.
everything. It's everything you and I've been talking about.
I'm surprised it took this long to have it happen, and
Well, but let's look into this. So what's going on in China? I mean, China's not doing well economically. I mean, China's debt is worse than the U.S. Not federal debt, but when you accumulate all the debt of the provinces and the local municipalities, China is in much greater debt than the United States. They're dependent on other outside investment to keep the country going. It's mostly due to their infrastructure investments. They use central planning instead of a free capitalist market where people think they can make money. They go and they start a business and they do. In China, they have directed capitalism. So they said we're going to build apartment buildings and roads and cities, and so they kind of try to direct it, and they have a glut now of millions and millions of apartments that are unfinished that nobody wants. They've run out of money. They can't fund this anymore.
well, Bob, how long that's been happening with these abandoned apartments?
I know. I've been reading about it for a long time.
For 20
I'm
years.
saying it's all coming together now where, they've cut off investment in China. Their imports are way down. The American imports from China are at 20-year lows. The current rate of import that we get in China is equivalent to about 2003. I'm sorry, 2003. And part of that was Trump's tariffs. So when Trump put tariffs on it, that started companies moving away from China. Then
Right.
with COVID, China stayed locked down, if you recall, way longer than everybody else. So
Right.
companies couldn't get their stuff manufactured in China, so they moved over. And now with the declining investments, so China is in big trouble with exports. That's another part of the reason why they're aligning so closely with Russia. They've doubled. Russia was importing 25% of their cars from China. It's now 50%.
Well, I tell you what, yes, China is now doing good, but over 6,000 years, China has always went through economic downturn, and during the
So is the U.S.
right, but the thing with China is because of central planning, the government doesn't really give a shit about the people. I mean, we know that.
Right.
Nobody's voting. They don't. They're gonna stay in power. Everything Xi Jinping is doing is try to stay in power. The only time things gonna go through a dramatic change is when Xi Jinping passed away. Just like what happened with Chairman Mao. Chairman Mao passed away. The country went to a big spin, and I was just told by a very reliable source that Xi Jinping offers every Chinese citizen to catch spies is 500,000 yuan. So if I go back to China, I'm worth 500,000 yuan. I have to watch what I do, what I say. If I say something wrong, somebody hand me to the government, they get 500,000, right? And now they're teaching kids from kindergarten to watch what the parents say in China. So now we're going back to the time of the Cultural Revolution.
Wow.
This is exactly what happened. So, yeah, China is in decline, but China has been in decline before, and they have to came out. But it's not a presidential change in the will of the people. Is a dynasty change. So it's from one emperor to another one, right? So we'll just have to weigh it out. But I believe eventually, China's not going to collapse, but probably just going to go into another big decline. Like,
Well,
5,000.
but we have to acknowledge that a lot of our talk on here has been saying that China's defeated the U.S. That the U.S. and that's not happening. So just as everything you're saying about China is not going to go away, neither is the U.S. China is not this economic dynamo power, over the U.S.
The problem with the U.S. right now is because, our president's compromised by Russia and China and whoever the money come from, because now we're finding all these millions and millions of dollars. So other country is taking advantage of the situation. So we don't have if 2024 we do not elect a tough president and to start reclaim our power from the world, and will be continue to decline.
Well, I don't think we lost power, but the
We're definitely not like as strong as we're not looking that great.
China's facing deflation. They have huge unemployment in youth, 18 to 24. Their unemployment is enormous, and they have low consumer spending. They say the low consumer spending is because of the lack of a social safety net. So like you were saying, and this is something I had never thought of, but in that respect, Social Security actually spurs consumer spending. So Chinese folks are not spending their money. They're hoarding it for their retirement, and that's slowing their economy. Deflation means products are selling for less money, meaning the companies now have to cut expenses somehow. So they're in a very difficult economic situation. But yeah, like any large country, they'll make adjustments. They'll try to get out of it. But I think the biggest risk we have right now is that's why they're cozying up so much to Russia, because they need the resources that Russia has, and they need to export more to Russia to make up for the deficit. And where's a good place for them to get chips? They're not sitting down going, well, we're screwed. We don't have microchips. Obviously, they're trying to develop it, and the U.S. is trying to do everything that it can to slow that down. But it's more incentive to invade Taiwan. I mean, it's not just some legacy thing now. I mean, it's like a matter of their national
So,
security and the
so
future
Bob,
of their economy.
I know, Bob, you're reading this newspaper and you're reading the article, and
I'm
you
reading economics. I interrupt our conversation. As I was editing, I saw the disconnect when it happened. I didn't see when it happened live. Sherry made reference to article that I read. She questioned the accuracy of the article or an agenda behind the article that I supposedly read, getting all this financial stuff that I've been saying. I did not read one article. I was not regurgitating someone else's narrative. I read a dozen or so financial news pieces talking about the Chinese economy, different aspects of it. These were not op eds, these were not political. They were all basically financially, here's what's going on in the Chinese economy. Just like you would read here in the States when the Fed speaks or when they get a new economic report, like a jobs report or something, and then they'll talk different parts of the economy. I use these data points to try to figure out what's happening. I also did separate searches looking to better understand certain concepts, like deflation. I tried to learn what deflation is, how it impacts economy, because if inflation is bad, you would think, okay, deflation sounds good, right? Well, economics isn't really like that. Almost just about everything has a good side and a bad side. And it's a matter of how these things come together. The narrative that I'm giving, the cause and effect and the chain of events and how that affects Russia and how that affects Taiwan, that was all me. But Sherry seemed to think that I read one article and that I was treating that as the authoritative everything about the Chinese economy, and I was just sort of regurgitating that as we go. And that is not at all what happened. I took an interest in the Chinese economy, so I'm spending time understanding it. My goal here is not to find a narrative. My goal is not to affirm any beliefs that I have. My goal was to understand, to learn about what's happening in the Chinese economy and better understand how that affects these global politics. And that's what I was trying to bring to, the listener, the viewer. So if you're watching on video, you'll see my face where I'm like totally confused. I have no idea why Sherry keeps saying what she's saying and she's not hearing what I'm saying, and probably vice versa. So we now resume our regular program.
okay. You completely believe what this article reported is the right information. There is absolutely a interest for United States to propaganda China is not doing that good, because on the other side, I'm telling you, on the other side, hold on, I watch the Chinese news every night, right? CCTV4 in Chinese. In China, now I believe that's also propaganda. In China, they're saying how great we're doing, how terrible.
Of course they are.
Right. So
Who in this country is saying how great we're doing? What media outlet is saying that we're the world's power over China? I don't know of any.
okay, but the newspaper article saying how terrible. I'll give you an example. I traveled to China 20 years ago with many Americans. Okay, and I took a lot of American there that has never visited China, and they go to China. They're like, wow, we thought everybody's holding a red book and wearing these green uniform. We cannot believe how thriving Chinese people are, and look all the food, and everybody say, oh, kids in China is hungry, and we come to this, I'm sure there's hungry people in China, there's poor situation, but what I'm saying is, you say, okay, you're reading economics. It's an economic reported by United States reporter. Okay, so you somewhere in the middle there's some truth to it, but somewhere there's also propaganda.
You think that these economic global, by the way, throughout the world, you think that these economic reports are made up? That they're
I'm
fake?
not saying they're made up. I'm saying they're going to lean towards against saying China is not doing good. I'm not saying they're made up. I mean, if that's the case, we should believe in everything globally everybody says, right?
Well,
I'm just very
you're
skeptical
talking
with
about
any news report.
culture, You're talking about culture and dynasties and history and things. I'm just talking about economic realities, okay? We as the United
But
States
you don't
have an
know what the
issue where
economic reality
we
is.
are so
Read the
inwardly focused,
newspaper.
we don't
You're not
see what's going
physically
on in the
there.
world. And there are economic realities to what's happening in China. I mean, I'm not saying everything's wonderful and great. Why do you have a hard time accepting the fact that their economy is not doing well?
I'm not saying I don't have a problem accepting the fact, but you can't read this as an absolute truth either. Because if you go to China right now, you're going to see there's a lot of wealthy people. People are living their lives. It's not everything you read is not absolute truth. I'm not
Well, you
saying
can
nothing's
how
not
many
doing
wealthy
well.
people are in the United States? How many people the cost of gasoline and the cost of food is a non-factor whatsoever?
I don't know. But by
Well,
sheer
there's a
number,
lot of them. You
wait,
know that.
wait a second.
Just because there's wealthy people doesn't mean that the economy's not in
Well,
trouble.
here I'm going to tell you why. Because you have the United States have 380 million people, right? Let's just add a few more millions because we have an open border now. China has 1.5 billion people. So even a small percentage of the rich people in China is more than the rich people in the United States because now here's the thing, the middle class in the United States is way bigger. But if China have 680 million, the Chinese government say we brought 680 million people out of poverty. I tell people, well, there's still 900 million people in poverty. But 680 million people is twice the size as United States. That's what I'm saying. I'm
So
saying that
how does that affect anything that I said? How
what
does
I'm
that
saying is
counter
you're
anything that I said?
you're saying, oh, China is in decline. So as
Of
United
course, yeah,
States.
absolutely. They're in decline economically. That explains a lot of what's happening, and
You don't think
it
America's
also
declining
informs
to
you
have
to understand the risk that we face in Taiwan and the issues that are going on. I mean, this is just information. I'm not sure why you're so worried about it.
I'm not worrying about it. I'm just saying you look at the newspapers that these are the absolute truth. I'm saying you should read it with skepticism as much as you.
You don't think I read news with skepticism?
Well, I mean, you're like, oh,
You
this
should
is
look at
what
my
people
you should go back and watch my YouTube. There's no harsher critic of the media than me.
right. But what I'm saying is, you can read this newspaper, and I did the same thing when 20 years ago when I was like going
I'm
back.
not reading any opinion pieces. I'm not reading any pieces that are extrapolating out and saying because of this you should feel this way about Xi Jinping or China or Biden or anything else. I'm just reading economic reports. I mean, did you know China stopped reporting on youth unemployment? They're just not reporting the numbers at all now.
What is the youth unemployment in the United States?
I don't know.
Okay, well,
What you seem to think that this is almost like a sport, that one team has to win or anything else. I mean, it's just, it's just economics, okay? It's the
yes,
state of the economy, and those economics are going to influence the actions of that country and where their interests lie.
well, Chinese.
So that should help inform our foreign policy and how we handle it.
Well, our foreign policy right now is not to make sure China does not. Our foreign policy is making sure China doesn't expose all what Biden have did or done and collected from China. That's our foreign policy right now. Our foreign policy, everything we're doing from the White House is benefiting China, is benefiting Russia, Ukraine. I mean, look what happened. Who we're giving money to, who our foreign policy benefit to is every country Biden collected money from. That's our foreign policy right now.
Well,
And you know what? Another thing is our military recruitment is down. Our police recruitment is down. Crime is over United States. Homelessness is over United States. And let's look at
you know what it feels like, Sherry? It feels like you're being defensive, like I'm attacking China, so you're responding
no, no,
by
no. I'm
attacking
not
the
saying
U.S.
defensive. I'm saying forget about China for right now. Let's look at how do we solve our own problem. Our youth, the test score is down. I mean, you said China. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to defend China. I'm probably the worst critic for China, but you have
But
to
you're saying
also.
all the information I have is wrong. It's untrue. It's
I'm not saying
propaganda
untrue. I'm saying
because
it's
you don't
not
like it.
necessarily absolutely true. It's not necessarily true. So China have a deflation right now. So that means,
Well, they're on the brink of deflation, but yeah.
okay, so things could be more affordable, right?
Well, yeah.
Okay, I
Economics
wish
are
we have a deflation right now in the United States.
economics are complicated, but yeah, we if there's not, people tend to think there's one good. Like in the U.S.,
Right.
they'll report that credit card debt is high and savings for retirement is really low. So this is really bad. There's a potential catastrophe looming because when these people retire, they're not going to be able to take care of themselves. Okay, that's one side of it. But one of the things I recently learned in reading all this stuff, there's a negative side to them not spending as well because consumer spending helps keep an economy going. And, so while in the U.S., you could put present cautions for the fact that people aren't saving enough for the retirement. But when you go into China, they're having problems, and it would be a lot better off. One of the ways they might address consumer spending is to increase the social safety net. So if people feel like they don't have to save as much, then they can get them to spend more. So consumer spending drives an economy.
Well, I don't think consumer spending drove Chinese economy probably till recent years. What drove Chinese economy was manufacturing. When all the manufacturer went to China, when WTO, they joined the WTO, and then people start using China to manufacture all their goods. What you're saying is, okay, it's not necessarily people save less, but here's my problem. We always joke about it. In the United States, one person make money, they spend like five people earning. In China or in any Asian country, really, it's five people will make money in the household, but they only spend like there's one person living there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Save to save money is a culture thing. It's not what drives the economy. Chinese people traditionally want to make sure they have plenty of saving, and traditionally there was never safety net in China for anybody. So that's why you have to take care of your elderly parents. It's a culture thing because there is no safety net in China ever.
Well,
But
all I'm saying is they're looking at different options for them to
but
help. That might be something that they can do to help.
but here what I want to tell you. You said, well, consumer drives the economy. Well, you don't, in the United States, there's no manufacturer to support that economy. You have most of them are low skilled worker. I'll tell you something was really interesting. I went to Aldi's
So
deal.
would it be a good thing to bring chip manufacturing here?
I think they should bring a lot of manufacture back.
So that would be a yes. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
they should
So you
bring.
don't disagree that that's a good program to have.
I don't disagree with the program, but I like to see exactly where the money is going to go eventually, and whether it's going to be used as the right thing. When the government come up with the program,
Well, and then the other thing is, will subsequent presidents, Congresses, will they keep it going? Because
well,
that's one of the issues we have is we have such short election cycles here that some of these programs we get started, the next president comes in, they shut everything down.
look at the Inflation Reduction Act.
Wow.
They reduce
Go,
inflation.
go back and watch my commentary. From day one, I said there's nothing in it
There's
that's
nothing in
to
it.
reduce inflation.
Right. So
And how did I know that? By looking at the economics. I looked at what was in the bill, and it was basically spending. And I saw nothing that could possibly reduce inflation. And now even Biden comes out and says, well, we never should have named it
never
that.
named it
Well,
exactly.
they sold it to the American people like that.
Well,
But
here's
again, if you just listen to the label, that's a headline, that's a TV news thing, and they say, oh, why wouldn't you sign an Inflation Reduction Act? You don't want the inflation to go down? Well, that's the way it's sold to the American people. But if you read what's in the act and you understand a little bit about economics, then you go, well, wait a minute. There's no mechanism in here to reduce inflation. If anything, it might increase inflation because it's increasing government spending.
So this is when I want to go back to Trump's genius foreign policy when it comes to trade and consumerism. what he essentially did, and I wish he would have been able to finish it, is he was diverting manufacturing. Instead of going to China, he was trying to get them into Vietnam,
Right.
Philippines, even Mexico, right?
Hmm.
Because if you would provide Mexico with manufacturing, that's our ally, that's our neighbor. You reduce the amount of migrant that's coming in, you help Mexico's economy, and in turn it will help us directly. You help China's economy, you're not helping United States. And to bring manufacture back to United States after we have given that away for the past 2 to 3 decades, do we even have the infrastructure, and how expensive that would be to bring it back? So when Trump did it, it said, okay, let's take that away from China, give it to other smaller country that's our ally. We get a cheaper deal, and meanwhile, I'm taxing China to death. So that was a genius foreign policy move
Yeah.
on his side. Now,
Well, but how did he do that? I mean, the government in the United States doesn't say we're going to take from you and give to you, because that's all private industry. That's all private business.
because he said, "Bring your money back. We're not going to tax you." Remember, he had $1 billion. He had an incentive, tax
Yep.
incentive, for people to bring that back. And he started. What else did he start? And I truly believe I may be considered.
I
Remember,
already mentioned it in my economic talk, but go on. What is it?
but Hong Kong. Remember, Hong Kong was protesting. There was a ton of
Yep.
protests in China. If China was a huge mess,
Hmm.
so nobody wanted to put money in a country when they feel like politically it's shaky. So they took a lot of the money, came back to United States.
Tariffs.
Tariffs too.
That's what started the reduction in Chinese imports. I already said that it had started under Trump. And then COVID accelerated it because China kept their country locked down. And that's an important understanding for us to have, because they're already talking now about another wave of COVID with an election season coming up. The people cannot stand for any more lockdowns. Because let me tell you what else I learned in my economic research. Okay, for whatever reason China decided to do these lockdowns, okay, they knew they were hurting their economy. It was in their interest to get the rest of the world to shut down to even the playing field, because if China shut down and the rest of the country stayed open, all of their exports would go to other countries, because other countries have to continue to operate and run. So the World Health Organization, when China did their lockdowns, the head of the World Health Organization called them human rights abuses. They condemned the lockdowns. China invited him to their country. You didn't hear word from him for like a week or two. Then he came back praising China, praising their lockdowns. It's the way to go. Then Italy had their outbreak. The World Health Organization and Chinese officials went to Italy and orchestrated their lockdown, and then that became the model for the entire world. But China screwed themselves even more, because when the rest of the world opened China's zero COVID policy, they prevented people from developing natural immunity. And because they kept everybody locked down. So even as far as December of last year, they were having large amounts of death from people with COVID because they didn't have natural immunity. And they probably were dealing with older strains of the virus because they kept everything locked down. But they also hurt themselves. So right now, Chinese exports to the United States are at a 20-year low.
Well,
That
first
means
of
those
all,
products have gone somewhere else.
how stupid are the world leaders if they decide to lock it down because of China? Number
Well,
one,
exactly.
right? How
And
stupid are they? Right? So we should have never locked it down, and Trump
no,
started that. So that was stupid. And
and by the way, Sherry, I want to stay on that. That's some lesson we have to learn, and it disturbs me that there's nobody talking about. Let's look at what we did and talk about what's good and what's bad. I mean, they're acting as though everything did was right, and we're susceptible to it again.
the only person that did not lock it down was DeSantis. He kept Florida open, and Florida's economy
Well,
thrived.
he did start that way. I know, because my daughter went to Florida to get away from here. He didn't
Yeah.
actually lock Florida down, but he prevented people from coming in. But by the time everyone, the scientists, started to realize this thing wasn't what we thought it was, the death rate wasn't as high, he opened everything back up. And you're right, he took a lot of heat for that.
But and then my understanding, I talked to somebody from Texas, and they're like, "Yeah, we didn't lock. Texas didn't get locked
Right.
down." So how stupid all the world leaders to say, because China can tell you to lock it down, but it's up to your country to
Right.
decide. So why are we listening to China to begin with? As far
Well,
as natural immunity, and I can tell you about natural immunity in China. Before COVID, for many, many years, because this one child policy in China,
hmm
everybody's so worried about their kids getting sick. There was already a problem with natural immunity in China because overuse antibiotics. Rather than if you get a flu, if you get a cold, have your body naturally recover, go through the sickness, they immediately say get on antibiotics. It's all by injection. So, yeah, your body, I mean, I can tell you why I know this. I was in China with my husband then, and I got sick. And they gave me multiple antibiotic injections. I mean, I'm getting drip over an hour, okay? And I was the most unhealthy in my entire life for that 1 year. I couldn't eat, I couldn't poop, I couldn't fart. I mean, it was just terrible. I'm not. It's
all
funny.
the indicators, right?
All the indicators. So if my body would have naturally, because I went to this very cold climate, right? I have been exposed to things I've never been exposed to. Instead of giving me antibiotics, I probably should have chicken soup, and then just let my body go through the cycle. I would have developed natural immunity. But what they did is they took an antibiotic, they killed everything. That was 20 years ago. I was 22 years old. At that time, my father said yes, it was overuse of antibiotics, and that's all. That's how they treat everything. So if you think about over the 20 years, they're using all these antibiotics, and they're using on their animals, and the pollutions in China, the ocean, and all that stuff. That caused the Chinese people's health was their health is in great decline. Versus when we're growing up, we were eating dirt. I mean, on the side of the road, we're picking grass on the side of the road, not wash them, just pick it up, eat it. Did we get sick? Yes, we did. Did they have medicine to treat us? No, they didn't. Guess what? We survived. We lived. So that is the problem with China. Is starting from central planning with the one-child policy. You have more men than women. I mean, there was multiple social issues in China. As far as youth unemployment concerned, a lot of parents, just same thing as here, right? I have one child. There's no way this kid is going to a manufacturing job. There's no way this child, I'm going to get them through college. They need to be managers and whatever. There's only so many top executive position open. You need people to work the lower skill jobs. But when you have one child, your whole entire hope is on this kid. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
And I walked into Aldi's the other day, by the way. So they were talking about in United States raising minimum wage, right? Minimum wage. So you have to now hire people. You have to pay them $15, $18 right out the gate. I went to Aldi's at Shaler Plaza the other day. It was one cashier, 8 self checkout. That is at least 3 cashier job eliminated. And
Right.
we're going to see more and more of that automation. Now, in China, it's the same thing. Now they have robots. They would deliver dishes from the kitchen to your table.
hmm
That is going to happen here. So I think this raising minimum wage, less population, young population that's willing to work is going to cause a lot of problem. That is a problem the whole world need to figure this out, right?
hmm
And yeah, I do believe China let old people die because there's too many old people and they just can't afford it.
Yeah, I mean that's just the natural, pragmatic thing to do if you eliminate human rights and make it all
Yeah.
about the collective. Sure.
Well, China had never had human rights. I mean, when in the history of Chinese history of 5,000 years that was human rights, there was democracy. Your truth bomb just fell, by the
I
way.
know.
Yeah,
Drop the bomb.
drop the truth bomb. Mic drop. Truth bomb drop. That was
Hey,
one thing. That was
I,
one thing I want to say. we're gonna talk about the next show because you haven't watched the Tucker Carlson interview with Trump.
Right.
I'm not. Let's not talk about that since you haven't
Okay.
watched it. Yeah.
Let me mention one thing since you mentioned automation, robotics. I don't know if you're familiar with Craftsman tools. So the big
I'm
deal,
familiar. I don't use it, but I'm familiar.
well, the big deal in the U.S., this goes all the way back to the 70s and before, was American made steel, American made tools. So
Right.
Craftsman were better tools than what was coming out of Japan and China. So they were sort of the mechanics, home mechanics gold standard. They're real high end, expensive stuff, Snap on, Mac tools. But when Sears, before Sears got in closed down, they shifted their manufacturing over to China. So the
Okay.
mechanics, hardcore, working man said they're junk, they're Chinese made. Well, the tool quality did improve. They got better. In it's China. So now most of the tools are still made in China, but they're guaranteed for life and things like that. Well, Stanley, who owns Craftsman, made a decision. We're bringing Craftsman back to the United States. USA, it says right on here, forged in Texas, USA
Okay.
made. So their plan was to build a factory, fully automated tools forge factory, and that way they could get the manufactured costs down to a level that offshoring would do, and then we can now have American-made Craftsman tools. So I was reading an article about this, and the article to me got it all wrong. The headline and what the article said was they closed this factory down. They said that they couldn't get it to work. They couldn't solve all the problems that they ran into. So basically, it was a failure of technology, engineers, that type of thing. But if you read the rest of the story, what really happened was because of the pandemic, Stanley Craftsman got into some serious economic problems. Their sales plummeted. They had to start cutting costs all over the place, and this is a big expense. So yes, it took longer. It was taking longer to get this factory working, but they pulled the plug on it. So they completely shut it down, and now the factory sits in Texas for sale. It's probably going to go to somebody for pennies on the dollar. But the way the news presented it was a failure of our technology, of our engineering, and of our craftsmen to get this factory working, and that's completely false. If you read the whole article, what you find out is it was a financial decision by the company. They pulled the plug on it. They had too much money was being poured into it. They were losing profitability heavily, and they just had to cut operations, and that was one of the ones they cut.
But
So the reason I have it is they did ship some of the ratchet sets, and I actually went to Lowe's and bought some for myself. So I have recently made in USA Craftsman tools, which has something that hasn't been in existence since about the 70s.
but think about it. So let's just say if this factory is successful and is completely automated, right? How many people are they going to employ? So yeah,
Well,
we bring the manufacturer costs down. We also eliminating employing a lot of people. So when people are not being employed and they're replaced by robots and AIs, so what kind of in 5 to 10 years? This is going very quickly, right? Because we started with couple Giant Eagle have self checkout, and the self checkout is just 4 stations. Now you go into Giant Eagle, they develop into more and more and more stations. So just that industry alone, you eliminate a lot of people to get hired. Now they're coming up with robot can flip 400 burgers.
well,
And
sure, an AI, but I mean that's throughout history. That's how economies have gone. I mean, you have automation. So the people that would be employed by this would be higher end people that understand. They had experts in forging tools because in order to develop machines to do it, you have to know how to do it by
right.
hand. But people to maintain the equipment. So for the amount of tools they would put out, if you go back 50 years, they would have employed an army of people. It would be a very small number, relatively speaking, but these would be higher end, higher paying jobs too. I mean, I personally like the self checkout. Yeah,
I like
maybe
it.
I'm a
No, I
bad
like.
guy. I'm
No,
not.
I'm a,
I'm
I
not
love self checkout.
anti-worker. I just like to bag my own stuff.
No, I like self checkout because I hate when I go to a register to check out And the thing is, like, some people are super friendly. I'm not in there for a chat. Check my shit out. Let me get out of here. But some people, oh, how are you today? I know I'm not having a conversation with the cashier. So when I go to grocery store, I do self checkout because I'm fast. I can do this on my own. I get in, I get out. I do not have to interact with
I
anyone.
agree.
So I love that.
And I buy for my father and myself at the same time. I can separate them when I bag them, and
I don't have to
so
talk to anybody. I mean, I hate going to like these super friendly cashiers.
I just
And
want
I
to
was
check
like,
out.
yeah, they ask about, oh, how are you doing today? Oh, they want to tell you their story. I don't care. Check me out. Let me be gone.
Well, Aldi, now I don't know where their pay rate is now, but before the Trump economy, they were significantly higher
They are.
hourly pay than other people. But they didn't have just cashiers. If you were an Aldi employee, you had to do everything. So, you brought the stock out, you managed the shelves. So when I would go into Aldi, the cashier would actually be working out on the floor doing stock. And when you went up to the checkout, they would come over then and sit down and check out. So on a busy day, they might bring two people. But again, those two people they were the only ones in the store, and they did everything it took to run the store. So, if they've added self-checkout, that's just allowed them to bring, check out more people, have more customers, but obviously with less, employees. So they always ran their operation with a
Lean.
model that allowed them to have less employees.
Yeah, very lean operation. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where everything's going. But
But that can be bad. That can cause problems for people, like AI and things like that, replacing jobs. But, I mean, at some point you have to embrace it. And you have to ask yourself, is it better to go over to China and take advantage of really low price labor, or to bring it back here, have it automated, have those, not only those employees, but all the services and companies that service those machines and maintain them, and the utilities and taxes that they pay, and all of that. I mean, it's still better to have an automated factory in the U.S. than it is to be manufacturing offshore.
well, when I was watching the Chinese news, they do show a lot of fully automated manufacturing. Actually,
Oh yeah,
they're eliminate jobs over there
right,
because the Chinese, as their living standard got higher, and they're like, we brought 680 million
right.
people out of poverty. Well, the other 900 million go like, well, we need more money, and so
Well, and that actually precipitated even Trump's policies and tariffs and things. Yeah, because
yeah,
as they start off with really low pay scale, but as you start lifting the cost of living, even when I was still working, we were facing that issue where we were getting, because it's cheaper to manufacture, but then the quality issues we had to deal with such a far distance, and the shipping and the time it took. It was getting to a point where companies were starting to question, did it make sense?
yeah.
So then, of course, you throw in Trump's policies and then the COVID interruption and everything, and it just totally shifted everything.
So I understand the TSA is going to start mandate mask again, and starting September 1st, because supposedly it's coming from Canada. So I'm thinking, I guess a COVID schedule to arrive to United States by September 1st, and then some people think by October we'll have another lockdown. It's a practice for the 2024 election season. It's
We
interesting.
can't.
It's interesting. I don't think anybody will comply this time.
I personally will not do any changes for a lockdown, but if they shut business down, that's what my concern is. They shut down the economy. Yourself too. I mean,
I'm not sure how many bars and restaurants will actually comply this time because the state are not going to be able to afford it. I mean, think about the Allegheny County lost millions of alcohol tax. The state lost millions of sales
yeah,
tax from bars and restaurants. You think they can afford it? They can't afford it. They're not
yeah.
going to be able to shut us down because the government can't afford to shut us down. So I'd be happy to get paid and go walk my dogs every day. But, I mean,
Then
come
you
on.
pay for it in inflation later.
Exactly. So what's the point?
Yeah, it concerns me. I'm not getting alarmed yet, but when I start hearing the talk, it concerns me.
Yeah. So, all right. Well,
Hey, thanks for the spirited discussion.
that was good. I
Yeah.
feel like we're on the debate stage. I'm Nikki Haley.
Yeah, this is the debate after the debate.
Yeah, this is a debate. It's me, Nikki Haley, against men. I love all the. I just want to put this out there for all the women. Right? She said, if you want to hear somebody talk, ask a man. If you want to get something done, ask a woman. When I said that to you, laugh about it. But I'm gonna tell you, you go to if you can be a fly on the wall to when girls' night out. That most women will relate to that.
Is it true though? I mean, because among men, there's this thing where women talk too much. I just want to be quiet. Why does she keep talking to me?
Yeah, well, you mean some women feels the same way. If you go, I mean, does your wife probably tells you, I need to have my quiet. I mean, I always say I need to have my quiet time. Even my
Not so
son,
much.
I love my quiet time. So
So do I.
if you get to all the women together, they'll be
But
like, oh my God.
I think Nikki Haley's saying comes from like the workplace, and maybe even around the home, where there's
Yeah.
projects where men talk about the work that needs to be done and women do it.
Never
I
get
think that's
done.
where it comes from.
Yeah, or you know what? There's a dishwasher, but you put like there's a sink, and right next to the sink there's always a dishwasher. But somehow that glass, that bowl can never make it from the sink to the dishwasher. Or if the dishwasher's done, somehow the dishwasher just does not get unloaded. I think those are the things that women
When you
talk
bring up
about.
those issues, I'm the woman of the house. Well, my wife's still working and I'm not, so I naturally start doing everything. But even when we were both working, I have this thing. I think the dishwasher should always contain dirty dishes, right? So in other words, when it's finished, they're clean, put them away.
Exactly.
And then as you consume, put dirty dishes in the dishwasher. That way we don't have dirty dishes out everywhere.
Right.
But, people are lazy. Nobody wants to put the clean away. So you end up with dirty dishes everywhere. And when that gets to be too unwieldy, then at the last resort, you put away the clean ones and then load it. It's silly. I'm like, I don't want to look at dirty dishes. Just put
That's
them
right.
away.
Yeah.
So every morning I wake up and I put the dishes away. And I actually timed myself to see how long it takes. Even a very full dishwasher is right around 5 minutes. So that's what I say now. I go, it takes 5 minutes. That's all it takes. I didn't have time. 5 minutes. Try it. And people that think it's too hard.
Engineering of you.
What's that?
I
So I'm
said
kind.
engineering of you.
You got me going.
Yeah.
I do laundry.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then I have like my son, our dogs would drag all the dirty laundry over the living room, whatever. I'd be like, well, can we just all pick it up? After a while, I'm like, I'm not picking it up. You're not picking it. None of us are picking anything.
Well, okay, I know we're over, but I bought a robot vacuum cleaner. Life changer. Okay, but the problem is you have to pick your stuff up. You can't have like clothes spread around.
Exactly.
These things are amazing. The one with Vision AI that I didn't have to teach it anything. I just set up the app, turned it on, it went around and it learned all the rooms all on its own.
Wow.
It's amazing. And it's just every day, and it does a great job. Every day our floors get vacuumed. And I'm waiting for a lawnmower. I'm waiting for a Vision AI lawnmower so I can do the same thing.
I'm waiting for Rosie.
Rosie, from Jetsons.
Yeah.
You remember Jetsons. All right.
Yeah, I want a Rosie.
You are Rosie. So am I.
Yeah, I want a Rosie. So, all right. Well, this was fun.
All right.
And,
Thanks, Sherry.
And the next one, we're going to talk about.
We're still
Trump.
friends, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why are we?
You said your mom told you had thick skin. And I don't want to get sexist or anything here, but a lot of women don't have thick skin.
No, I have very thick skin, and I don't care about a lot of little things.
I guess a lot of men don't too.
I worked. So one of my employees years and years ago, he's a gay man. He's a drag queen. He performs and everything. And then at one point he said to me, he said, "You're not like a woman." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You're just not like a woman." I'm like, "What? Am I not sensitive enough? Not this, not that?" It's like, "Yeah, you're like a guy." I'm like, "I guess in some ways I am. I'm not clingy. I don't get mad. I take nothing personal, so we're good."
All right. So you're more of a guy. Gotcha. Well, no, and you know what that is? That's just all people are different.
All people are
Sure. There's some things are more common in men and women and black people, but everybody's unique.
yeah,
And it's just that's one of the flaws in all this identity politics, and one of the
exactly.
sad parts. It diminishes our uniqueness for sure.
Exactly. I mean, I know a lot of women like me. Women I'm friends with, they all like me. So, and we're not gay either.
All right, Sherry, have a great one. Have a good
Have a good
weekend.
one. Good one.